Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Diary of a Psychic Medium with me, Amber Amrine. Today we have my wonderful friend Joanna joining us once again to talk about a very unfortunate but very important topic of discussion. She was scammed out of 6 figures, a lot of money, over many years by a psychic that claimed to be helping her with this big past life wound. Unfortunately, this happens a lot and can be a very confusing and sticky thing to process through, so we talk about it to help you and help shed light on this topic of discussion. Here we go. This is something that Joanna just recently kind of began processing, so we unpack a lot. This is unfortunately something that happens very frequently in this line of work, which is very frustrating because I feel like it really puts a negative tone on something that is really meant to help people. You know, it really takes advantage of people's vulnerability. So we really dive into this topic trying to give you advice and insight as to specific tactics people use to manipulate, as well as how to look for those red flags and what to do to just keep yourself safe. As a fun little side note, whenever Joanna and I have to film something, we get very giggly. So at the end of this podcast, there will be some bloopers. Alrighty. As a life coach and consultant, Joanna has spent the last 15 years on a personal development journey, culminating in the launch of her business, Coach by Design. Certified in holistic lifestyle coaching by the CHEK Institute, Reiki, and Human Design, she strengthens the mind-body dynamic to help clients build a solid wellness foundation and discover their unique life purpose. Joanna's practice integrates holistic nutrition, energy work, breath work, and personalized routines to empower clients. Through her dedicated approach, Joanna continues to inspire individuals to realize their full potential and lead fulfilling lives. Here's Joanna. Alrighty, so we have Joanna with us to discuss a terrible experience. She was very badly scammed by a psychic. So we want to bring light to this kind of situation to help people that have gone through the same, kind of just know what red flags to look out for, to feel understood. This is just kind of a safe space to unpack the situation and the process of manipulation and all of that stuff.
Thank you. I'm excited to start these conversations. I think it's a really important topic, especially in light of a lot of these documentaries that are being aired revolving around exposing cults and the psychology behind cults. And the reason why I bring that up is because that actually prompted me to wake up in a new light. The similarities and the parallels around scam artists and cult leaders and just people who have manipulative tendencies, it all mirrors each other. And energy, even though it is non-physical, it sometimes is harder to discern than the words being shared. But there's this intention behind it of like, do actions speak louder than words and all of that? But then there's that hidden element of what is the intuition saying behind the actions, behind the words. Back in 2017-ish, I was in a really vulnerable spot in my life. I went to a dark place of myself, and that preceded 2017. I was going through serious depression. I was just starting my holistic healing journey and understanding the physical world and how to heal my body and my mind. And through massive changes that were going on in my physical world, my external reality was also making great shifts, and the dynamics that I was experiencing were also making great shifts. The reason why I felt jarred so much by that is because when you're going through a change and there's a lack of groundedness, it can be really scary and lonely, even if you have people around you. I lived in one of the biggest cities in the country, in New York, and I was incredibly isolating for me to go through what I was going through, and not feel like I had anyone to talk to. I had always believed and had faith in the metaphysical world, and I was frequently seeking intuitive advice. But when I was incredibly ungrounded, I was searching in desperation for immediate advice. And I went online and I found a psychic who had great reviews, a lot of them, and they were local. And I thought without hesitation that I could get in, and somehow I did. Um, when I went there, I had unloaded everything that was going into my life because I finally had this safe zone to speak about what was happening. And I was in hysterics. I was crying. I was making my confessions. And along this journey, she had pointed out things that she could see that weren't obvious to what I was talking about, that weren't obvious to anyone else who was in my immediate circle, and they resonated with me. So it was a signal that, oh, she does know her stuff. However, the session ends and she said, I really feel like this is something from another lifetime. I feel like this is something that has just continued to impact you and has made an attachment onto you as an entity that um, shows up in your dynamics and what you do, and creates more distance and loneliness as a result of this past lifetime. Do you mind if I do more work on you, and then we can figure out what we can do? And I was lit up. I was like, absolutely, do some digging, whatever it is that you need to do. I want this gone for good. So later that day, I part and I get an email from her. I think it was later that day. It was either later that day or the next day. I get an email from her, and the summary is that it was this entity, in fact, from a past lifetime. I was in this lifetime a really powerful healer in a city, and in this city I would be able to touch people and magic basically ensued. I was able to help heal whatever ailments were going on to anybody that approached me. And one person had approached me who I refused to help because I saw the truth of what they were trying to heal from. And you can read between the lines. It wasn't good, but it involved children. And even though he had claimed to had hurt himself, it was much deeper than that. So he had wished upon me something that basically took away my gifts. And from that point on, in I wasn't able to help anybody in the same way. And in every lifetime since then, he has showed up because he is basically made an attachment to me. So it creates discomfort, anger, sadness, loneliness, isolation. And when I read this, I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. The email sums up like that we can do work together, that her way, like the only way to get this done is by the process that we are going to talk about. She had me hooked, right? Like there was no question about it. I was in a really sad and vulnerable place, and that was the start of this scamming journey. Um, in that moment, because she said there was no other way, and because and she said, let's keep this between us, because the more that we talk about it, the more that this can now impact your relationship. So we want to keep this sacred and make sure that the energy is contained. So we have to contain our excitement or nervousness around what we just discovered.
Do you mind if while we go, I like point out red flags?
Go for
Just so
it.
we can, okay. So the two big red flags here are, one, the sense of that being the only way, her being the only person. Anytime somebody presents themselves as the person of God or the answer or the only vessel to this higher healing or higher source, that is automatically a red flag, because energy is in all of us. There are multiple ways to break things through or break out of things. And that in itself is already putting them on a pedestal and kind of alienating you a little bit, or having you below them, in this place of like, this is the person of answers. It's just automatically makes them this like holy person. The second red flag there is the alienation, not being able to tell anybody. That is a very common manipulation tactic, because the less people you tell, the less people will be like, hey, that doesn't sound right. I don't think you should do that. So the best way to really keep you hung on their words is to make sure there's no outside interference.
Exactly. And so when you hear these things and you're in a really vulnerable place, it's like and then you're provided a plan. This is something that we actually had a private conversation about too, you and I, or we talked about like that she then from this point on, she created a very logical plan. And the plan was um similar to how ancient groupings would come together and make sacrifices to the gods. We have to create sacrifices to show the spirits, to show your team and ancestors and gods that you too are serious about creating space for new. And the sacrifices seem to be, the messages that I've been getting are that they have to be in in threes. So we're going to start by taking $300 out of your bank account in cash, and you're going to give it to me in a pillowcase, and then you're going to send it to me my way. Do you want to say something now?
Sure. So the tricky thing with these practices is a lot of times they can be rooted in something that is legitimate. With sacrifices, it is a sacrifice. So it's something that we value, that we are giving as an offering. So typically things like money, jewelry, those are things that we value. So if we're very attached to it, it's going to be referred to as a sacrifice, going by the law of three. There's like a lot of like buzzwords, which also will really fuck up your perception of what is true and what is not, because all of that sounds like, yeah, makes sense. It's very logical, which is also why, especially with cults, a lot of very intelligent people get wrapped into it. It's not just people kind of like oblivious. There's a very logical progression, and you never think it's going to be you. And you feel like you have the knowledge and tools to be like, no, if something's not right, then I'll be able to say so. But they use a very logical and intuitive progression to reach a certain direction. It's all these little baby manipulative tactics.
The other thing to note is that, like, at least in my experience, it was sprinkled throughout time. My scamming experience did last 4 years, but throughout the 4 years, I would question her ethics. I would reach out to her and I would say like, in ways that made her even uncomfortable. Are you going to tell me a timeline that I'm going to be able to get my things back? Are you going to, and I would list out all the things that I do remember, but she didn't want anything in writing. And that's the other thing too. The reason why she didn't want anything in writing is, now looking back at it, it's very obvious. You don't, like, no track records, no problem. But it was in her logic, and I don't know to this date if like this is actually like her truth, but it doesn't matter because it still, I've yet to see results, right? And I have yet to see anything come out of this that has been able to prove that what she was saying has been anything other than a scam. that she so it's that she didn't want it in like in hardwired payments or anything, because if it was, then there's like an energetic tracking system that could be done versus taking it out and then giving it to her. There had been times, especially during 2020, which was the last year that it happened, where there were a few Venmo payments or something. I forget how it was done. It's been a few years since then, but it was done electronically, but there was no written record as to like what it was going for or towards. But it started with 300, then it led to like $900 payments. And I'm saying payments because there were multiple situations of this, because there weren't enough. And then it led to, different things in between then, candle rituals, bath time rituals, buying a gold tabernacle to encase the energy. With the gold tabernacle, taking a gold necklace that I got from Cartier, and I took money out of and credit out of to buy so we could lock the energy in. And then in 2020 was the last big bang purchase. And I said, I am not doing this anymore. And I told her, like, it won't happen. And she promised me that that was the last purchase. Was a gold Rolex, and it had a story associated with it that was very specific to what she related back to with the entity. And so and she had to turn back the time. There was a whole thing around it. And so I gave her that. And once 2020 hit, just to note, between the initial meetup and the last time that I had seen her, we developed actually, in my eyes, a very good friendship. And she has a family, and I am deeply, to this day, hurt for her. Like, I'm hurting for her family because I visited them. And when I say family, I'm talking about innocent children, right? Not children that are part of this scheme or anything. They are babies. I was with her through one of her pregnancies, and like and a toddler, right? They're innocent to this, and I was like, and I had seen them grow a little bit, and it made me sad and conflicted to think, if I talk about this, like, could this impact this family? Like, there was just so many things that were going through my mind, but I don't know.
So throughout the process, because it took so much time, she didn't give you a timeline? Like, did she tell you why it wasn't working? Was this entity like just so powerful, or what was the deal?
Yeah, that's a good point. She did tell me the energy is really intense because I had intense healing powers in that one lifetime that he took things away from me. And um and she said, like, it's kind of like energy is mutable, so it's like cleaning out every corner of the house, and you want to make sure that you're doing enough sweeping in every hidden nook and cranny. And then she said, like, she would say, like, you have to also do things on your end while I'm doing this like heavy energy work on my end. And so we were seeing progress, at least in my eyes, like, oh, the work had become easier. And in
Which
reality,
makes sense too, because those are all like legitimate practices to get the energy moving.
right. Yeah. And I was seeing change. So when somebody is saying, like, I'm doing energy work on you, which is fair because energy creates belief systems, it creates faith, it creates thoughts, it creates action as a result of it. Like, all of that is valid. It was her insinuating this, we're on the brink of major change, we're on the brink of like this working out, we have to keep going, there might be more messages, I have updates. She would say, I have updates for you, and then like neglect to fully update me. We would then talk about like personal life. It was just like she had me
Oh,
stringing,
weird.
like, it was just like stringing things along. She would tell me that, she would tell me things like, that we'll know when this is complete, because you will have love back in your life. And I was still very desperate, so I was chasing her, being like, in like every now and then through text messages, am I gonna like what's the update with this? You know, I'm in X situation and I do want my money back at some point. And because I would text her certain things along that kind of vibe, she would then call me immediately and like be frustrated and say, you know, let's talk about this if you're ever feeling these things. And we had spoken even as recently as Mother's Day in text message, but it's the conversation has become like fewer and further between because she is dealing with some serious family issues that I was privy to as well. And it just felt like I think the reason why she's been extending it for as long as she has been um is because like she can, you know, she has this. It's not like there's anything that like I can truly do except what she thinks is keep this to myself and always feel like I have this sacrifice that has been given, right? And she in a way she has that power over me, but what made me realize how important this was to talk about at a certain point is like I had early signals to your point of like even when you were keeping even when she had initially said to keep my mouth shut about this, two things had come up that was like red flag and I still ignored it because I was already starting the process, right? And it she
And
couldn't
you're
do this to me.
desperate. You're in
Yeah.
a, yeah, vulnerable position.
Yeah, and she couldn't do this to me. We actually developed a friendship. Um the when I about like a half a year, maybe like three quarters of a year into me starting this back in 2017, when I was working, another colleague said that she had gone through something very similar to what I was currently going through. And she had basically unprompted brought that up. And she said that she cut it cold turkey. And it was from another psychic in another area. So in my mind, I was like, oh, that's bizarre. But that would never happen to me because why would it? Right. And then the other signal was that the two signals was whenever I would like reach out and ask for an update or be like I'm really frustrated by this whole thing, um I would get a call and she would say why are you texting that to me? And I have a handful of deeply intuitive friends and I would say like hey what's your vibe on this person, you know, just to kind of like see if my intuition was in check. And they got good vibes from this person, right? Like the person itself was cloaked in really good energy and authentic energy. So that was never off with what I was picking up. It was what she was doing that felt very weird to me. And so I kept going with the process, thinking, oh, it's going to get like, I'm going to get it back. I'm going to get it back. And I like this weird side of me post recognition still has this like faith that one day maybe I will get it back, right? Because I in a weird way as a human, like I cared about her human, right? And we developed a relationship over 4 years. And that's a long time when you're frequently talking to someone and they also talk about their personal life and and you've been to their home and you see things that you do build that trust. And then finally the third thing was I had gone to a psychic just for giggles, literally in another moment because I had spare time between like appointments and they tried to pull the same thing, but the energy actually felt really dark in that room.
Mm.
And I knew off the cuff that I was never going to like get deeper into this whole thing. And that was I don't know if I just said this, but that was in California. So
Mm.
it's everywhere. And it's unfortunate
Yeah.
because like there like for in any industry, there are great people and there aren't great people. And I think also what makes it complex is like the human spectrum is in every individual good emotions and like dark thoughts and like so we are all complex beings and complex systems and there are complex relationships and complex companies and jobs and industries and it's like how do we I think come back to your like ourselves so we can start becoming more empowered to anchor in our truths that are aligned to good intentions to pure intentions and that I think sometimes you have to get angry and release it and acknowledge that, like, yeah, it's shitty. Life can be really messed up, but it makes you stronger. And um and yeah, that's kind of where it's at now. And I just feel like bringing more awareness to this, because it's very real and clearly very common, um
Mhm.
is worth mentioning.
Yeah, I think what's really terrible too with sensitive people is making your problem their problem. So like getting you with you seeing that she has kids and like seeing these family issues, it's making you more sensitive to her, which would then prevent or decrease the likelihood of you talking about it or bringing it up or stirring things up for the fear of seeing how fragile this situation is and not wanting to stir the pot, you know? Did she did she do any love bombing in the beginning?
She didn't do love bombing, but I do know that that's a common tactic, right? Like I
Yeah.
do, in anything, like in a romantic relationship, in
Yeah.
manipulation, it's just there. What she did is she and I think when you find safety, like, and she even confessed it to me, like we understood each other on a human level, right? And
Mm,
there was a lot of security that was given. And when you're seen for who you are, flaws and all, because I confessed so much, um, she gave me that space to feel understood. And for like, and I when I see, and I've been around plenty of professionals before, right? And really reputable professionals, and I finally get like a sense of like, oh my God, like there's some progress that's happening in my life. I want to scream it from the rooftops, right? I
yeah.
really do. And like she gave me that, and and because we developed a relationship, I was like, there's no way I couldn't trust her in this process, even if my
Mm,
instincts felt like otherwise, right? Um,
yeah.
yeah, no, it wasn't love bombing. It was very much like maternal. And at that point in my life, I think I really needed a maternal figure, even though she was actually a little younger than me. She was
Mm,
she felt wise.
mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's so tricky because with energetic stuff, it's not tangible.
Hmm.
It's not tangible, and it's like there's such a fine line between playing on tradition and like getting a read for something and going with that and then just kind of skewing it. And I think the tricky thing, I'm thinking back to I had this like weird situation that had happened when I was 18, and the guy was very mentally ill. But he didn't present it himself as that. That was very confusing for me. I think I spoke about it a long time ago on the podcast. It was like, okay, it was I was in my first semester of college, I think, and it was an art design class, and there was this guy that sat at my table, and I became friends with the whole group, you know, at my table. But he just seemed very warm. He had very good vibes, and like, you know, it just we became friends. And he was saying that he was doing some sort of like project for his psychology class that was to get into USC. So it was like this really important project, and he just needed somebody to do it. So I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. If you need somebody, that's not a big deal. Now, the project was this like weird study on like sexuality or something like that. And he said that every day I had to send him pictures of like what I was wearing. And then I had to take a layer off and take a picture until it was naked. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to send you a naked picture of myself. So, but I said I could send like, I'll just send a picture of what I'm wearing. That's fine. But I'm not going to have my face in it. I don't like pictures. Um, and I'm glad that I had said that, because if I just took like a full faced, there are just many things wrong with that. Anyways, um, so then we had to meet in the library, and he, oh God, there was like this whole thing where it was like, oh, I have to stimulate your nipples and see how long,
How come this is the first time I'm hearing about this?
because they don't talk about this, and see how long it takes until they get hard. Like, it was like weird stuff. And I had, because of my sexual abuse, there was like, okay, certain things I was not okay with. There was like this questionnaire where he was like, how often do you masturbate? And I was like, I don't feel comfortable answering that. So I had my limits to it, but there was also some things that I was like, okay, fuck it. Because in my head too, it was like, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for me to heal from my sexual trauma as well. And I think what was confusing for me is like, he felt so pure, and I had, like, he would talk about his problems and his family stuff, and he had a crazy life. And I was like, fuck, we really bonded. And the situation just felt weird, but I was like, I don't feel like he would do anything weird like that. And then it got to the point where I started feeling really uncomfortable, and I was like, hey, you know what? I don't think I can do this. I'm so sorry. And he was like, oh, my professor is really interested in your thing because of your sexual abuse or whatever. And I was like, I'm really sorry, I can't do it. And he sent me to this text that was like, all caps, was like, she said she didn't want to do it, and blah blah blah. And he's like, oh, sorry, I meant to send that to my professor. And it's like, why would you be texting your professor, and why would he care that much?
Yeah.
That much? It was all really bizarre. But there was one time, I think this is when the red flag really kind of was like, wait, I think this isn't appropriate, even though it was very inappropriate. He had said that in high school, I guess, he was telling me he had this like confessional time where he was just saying how he thought something was really wrong with him mentally. And in high school, I guess he had gotten expelled because there was this girl that like was popular or something, and he was just a nobody, and he wanted to see if he could manipulate her into sending him nudes. And he got her to, and he sent it, I guess, to like everybody at the school or something, and he was expelled, and it became this whole thing. And so I was like, something is
Wow.
not right here.
Was
And
that
things
at the
just,
beginning of the
no, this
situation?
was towards the end. I think
Okay.
as time progressed, he started to feel guilty about it because we started bonding. And you know
Hmm.
I'm not like I try to have like authentic connections with people.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I remember feeling a lot of sympathy. I wasn't angry for him. He never admitted that it was all BS, but it was very obvious, especially looking back on it.
Hmm.
And I think at the time when I was like, no, I don't want to proceed forth, and then all of it happened, whatever, I remember telling him, it's like, hey, I think I can help you, because I felt like something's really wrong with him mentally, and he doesn't have a grasp on what's right and wrong. And I can feel the authenticity and like the purity from his energy that I don't think he understands. Like, something, it feels like there's something wrong chemically, because he feels like a good person, and I really wanted to help him. And it never really amounted to anything. And I'm honestly glad that I didn't, because I think that fucked me up. And I never really told anybody for many years.
Hmm.
I think I have told very few people, actually. Um, and it fucked with me more than I had realized. And I think I just needed to protect myself rather than trying to help him, you
Hmm.
know? Um, but it reminds me of that.
Yeah, it's very similar. It like a lot of the um, you know, ways in which it's like these little sprinkles of truth and building trust and like welcoming you into their life in a way, and you're
Yeah.
like, and you feel like there's this deeper connection. And also, I like you, and I'm very similar in the way of I tend to forgive. I don't necessarily tend to forget. And because I am a very forgiving person, it like things, I have the tendency to I guess allow people to cross an energetic boundary of mine for maybe like a hint or two longer because I try to intellectualize what is going on instead of just trusting that instinct of maybe space is going to allow me to become more aware of what actually I like what I actually need. Like what is the soul medicine here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just part of the experience of growing and evolving, and that's currently where I'm at. The interesting thing that I find is that like um people who have this manipulative tendency can fall into a couple of camps. One of them is like they're aware that it's for greed, and other people genuinely believe in what they're
Hmm.
doing. And that is where I can also understand that there's a lot of blurred lines, right? Like
Yeah.
if you believe in what you're doing, that authenticity shines.
Yeah. There's a misconception, especially with cult leaders, that the cult leader is just manipulating everybody around them. But a lot of times they really believe in what they're preaching 100%, 100%. But the way that it's channeled is in a way for their benefit, or it could even be like, I'm deserving of this because I'm very holy. Or they could just be really like fucked up mentally and just not understand the difference between good and bad. Like there could literally just be a chemical imbalance, like a psychopath, where it's like they just don't feel remorse. They just don't experience it. They don't understand it.
Mm-hmm. I guess this actually opens up a question. Did you hear that thunder? That was insane. Did it pick up?
I can't kind of heard it.
That's crazy. I, I so I haven't really told anyone in my family yet, and I think that there's interesting, approaches to life. There's some things that I feel more comfortable confessing to family and keeping sacred with the family, and then there are other things that, whether it's driven by like shame because they were also aware of my relationship with her,
Mm,
not necessarily what she was working on with me, but
yeah.
they were aware of like a friendship there. Yeah, it could be shame that is driving that, and the fact that I brought her into the life and gifts had been exchanged, and there's just it's blurry, and I'm not ready quite yet. But I did share it with my brother, and he asked a question about it, and I don't have an answer yet, and maybe I won't until the time comes, but like I don't know how I will respond because we have spoken as recently as May if she reaches out to me now that this
Hmm.
awareness has hit. Like I don't know if ignoring her is the solution. Or I don't know if kind of like keeping her at an arm's length is the solution. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know how to handle this.
Yeah.
And yeah, just friend to friend. I didn't know if like maybe like there's some semblance in your wisdom.
I mean, it's not, I think your responsibility is making sure you're okay and doing what you need for closure.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I don't feel like it's your responsibility to make her feel comfortable. And that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean to like, hey, bitch. Like, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean to like go be confrontational. Because I don't feel like that's productive either. I never feel like you should fight fire with fire. You know what I'm saying? And I don't feel like you would either.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's more like if you feel you need to just distance yourself, then go for it. If you feel you need to talk about it, then you can open up that conversation. But the tricky thing with those types of people is, I mean, they're very manipulative, and they know what works. And sometimes trying to have a conversation with somebody that isn't really being authentic back can be very painful too,
Mm-hmm.
and can make you feel like you're the problem, or that like, oh, you didn't believe in it hard enough. It's like putting the responsibility on you. It didn't work because of you. See, and now you're questioning it, and it can turn into something else that can cause a lot more pain, you know?
Actually, that brings up a really good point. When I would call out or question the because you mentioned love bombing before, when I would call out
Mm-hmm.
or question the process or be like, "Hey, what's the timeline? Like I'm getting a little like frustrated or anxious about this." There would be conversations on the phone because she would call me later that day or whatever, and she would say, "Don't you see the progress being made?" don't you think I'm doing work behind the scenes? I don't love like that I'm doing that. Like, not, there are people out there that wouldn't do this stuff. I want to make a difference in people's lives. I want to do these things. Like, I want to make people feel better, and I want to make you feel better. And I see the changes that are happening. When you came to me initially, you were a complete wreck. And like, she would talk, like, she calls out the changes that have been made. And so in that exact light, it's very confusing. It creates like more of like, am I actually the problem here? Like, maybe she's
Yeah.
right, right? Like, and that did lead to more of a prolonged time of not talking about this, or trying, or like questioning my intuition. So I don't know. Like, I don't know what I would say if she reached out. Like, because usually, at least this past year, when she's reached out, it has been more around like, like Happy Mother's Day, or like Happy Birthday, and then the conversations have become like on the phone further between each other. So and it's been personal, but I do think it like, the thing that I feel most comfortable saying to her is like, I'm done.
Yeah, it's so tricky, and I think what's also difficult is I don't feel from her. I feel like she's almost manipulated her own self, honestly, into feeling like this is okay, and like, oh, I'm doing good work, so I'm worthy of whatever. Or I don't, I don't even, I don't know. I don't even feel like very much is being done. But I'm feeling in her head this logical sense of like, oh, this makes sense. Like, this is correct. I feel like she's trying to back up her own delusions in a way, or her own, like, I don't know. It just feels like her mind is also very skewed, and it's very like dissociative or something like that.
Yeah, that's very accurate. And that's where it becomes a little bit more challenging, because that's where the authenticity meter in myself goes off,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm like, oh no, like, she believes in what she's saying. And even when you're talking about the classmate of yours, like, that's where the confusion lies, because
Yeah.
there's this like real truth that they're preaching, even if it's coming from like, even if like it's inherently uncomfortable in the dynamic. Because also, if you're looking at things from a very spiritual perspective, like, there's technically no wrong or right, right? It all
Yeah.
just is. But it's uncomfortable. Whatever is happening, it's uncomfortable. And when things aren't done out of love, but rather almost like their own imbalance, because maybe it is,
Mm-hmm.
to your point, dissociative, or a chemical misalignment, or their own like internalized manipulation to believe in what they're saying. Like, that's imbalance in many
Mm-hmm.
ways. And the universe is trying to like balance itself out right now, especially Earth. And I think that this is going to create more discomfort, but in a really good way. But in order for that to happen, these entanglements are like untethered,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I'm curious how this is going to pan out, but I do feel like very like the next conversation that I'm going to have is like, I appreciate all of the work that you did, but the time, like, I'm done. And if we
Yeah.
can work on closing this, and she might put up a fight, but I think that that would be the next conversation.
Yeah. I also want to highlight how this can really affect long term. So with energetics, things are not tangible, and if you don't have a well-developed intuition, it's just like you don't know what the fuck's going on. And a lot of scammy psychics and spiritualists and healers and stuff will use like this entity attachment thing as their like fucking powerhouse to get people to keep coming back and to spend money. And what's fucked up is like things can happen, and that can happen, and that's why it's like that's such a commonly used tactic because it's effective and it promotes fear. It's all of this fear stuff, which gets people locked in and disconnected from their logic and just like, fuck, like I'm fucked. I need help and I don't know what else to do. And I think it's like with a doctor, if they say there's something wrong, you go see another doctor, you get a second opinion just because we're human and we make mistakes. And like, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like that's really important to make sure you see multiple people or get different perspectives just to get like a more well-rounded approach or understanding and find a way forward that best resonates. But what also messes with us, which is also part of the manipulation, is it instills this fear that if I don't move forward, something's going to go wrong. And it's kind of like when you first told me about it when we had gotten together and that day you had lost your wallet and you're like, oh no, what if this is like bad karma from speaking about it? And it's like, no, you lost your wallet before you even said anything. It really fucks with our head. Yeah.
I guess the question here is, okay, so you seek multiple opinions and you start trusting yourself in many ways, but like what are, aside from seeking multiple opinions and learning about like what could resonate or what couldn't in these situations that are genuinely manipulative but coming from an authentic place where your meter is driven by authenticity, how does one, like, what are some suggestions, not necessarily how because everyone's different, but like what are some suggestions that you have that might allow people to recognize that something could be off?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I mean, I feel like what I naturally just want to go into is, always trusting yourself. Our environment is a reflection of us, like attracts like. So, the same way that when we're dreaming, the people, the situations in our dream are a aspect of our subconscious or a part of us, the same holds true with our day to day world. And I feel like the more that you really find balance within yourself, confidence within yourself, really get to know who you are, how you feel, what it feels like when something's off, talk to that part of the body, like have a very clear line of communication with your being and start to use your environment more as a deeper reflection of things already present in your body. I feel like it allows you to have a lot more trust and understanding in who you are and what all of that entails instead of putting so much value on the external. The external is only a reflection of you. It all comes from you. It's all you. We are all one. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it poses interesting new ideas for us to then digest in ourselves and ask our bodies how it feels and if our bodies want to proceed forth. And if there is a fear, if it's coming from a place of fear and desperation, it's not in alignment with you because you're source energy and you are all, you are abundance, you are prosperity, you are love. Mm-hmm. So if something is coming from a place of expansion and excitement, great, perfect. Mm-hmm. Go, but if it's coming from a place of desperation and fear, that may not be the way to proceed forth, and it's such a nuanced thing, but the significance and importance of really coming into your body cannot be like overestimated. Like it is so important.
1000%. I think that there is so much to be said about, first of all, when you break down the two energies that are push pull in life, right? Like you have the negative and positive forces, but it's either driven by fear or love. There's like in the simplest terms, where is it coming from? Number one, and then number two, what are your intentions behind the movement? Because you can say like, all right, I'm going to outweigh this fear because the intention behind it is love. Like when I first decided that I was ready to talk about it, there's still this conflicting sensation that I have in my body and my mind, because I know that like I've had this history with this relationship. But the intention is, wait a second, if this is happening in cults, this is also happening in many other industries. Let's have, then it's not talked about, right? And the intention is to spread this truth, right? So the truth of healing, the truth of coming back to yourself, and whether that means working on the physical body first, grounding, um eating nourishing foods, making sure that you're not really as inflamed chronically by like hydrating appropriately, like doing things like that, I think is some of the best that things that you can do. And it might seem harder because you want external validation at times when there's an ungroundedness, but I do believe that that was a huge part of my journey in between when this scam started and where I'm at now. If I didn't do these grounding activities, I don't think I would ever have come to this position of being like, no, it's time to talk my truth. It's time to bring awareness. It's time to outweigh the fear of the consequences of stuff that's behind the veil.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important, and it's like so simple yet so difficult, but it just like, man, the journey of self, like really feeling secure in yourself is the key to everything. And I feel like even in that, if you are okay, so I've had confusing times too. This was, I feel like more around like, I don't know, 2020, where there were a lot of like MLM stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't very like aware of them, and I had some people like reach out, and I was getting all of these like angel numbers in association with this like MLM, and I was like, fuck it, I'll go. Like, let's just take a chance. And I think what was confusing to me is in joining it, I was like, this seems really culty. Like everybody is just, I don't know, like nose deep in everybody's shit. Like they just are like in this stuff and like preaching it and regurgitating to each other. It was very weird. It didn't feel it just felt very weird. And I kind of like I got that I understood the benefit to it, but it also just felt weird. And I think it was confusing to me because I was seeing all of these like angel numbers and all of these like positive signs that I should move forward with it. But then once I was there, it was like, this doesn't feel right. But then I realized that the signs were not so much about the company itself. They had a lot of really good like marketing booklets or like these little pamphlets about how to like niche and like just really good business information. So I was like, fuck yeah. I tried to like take all of that information in, while I was with it. And I was like, okay, I'm done with this. This isn't for me. And I think too, by feeling secure in the self and just keeping yourself pushing and like looking for that breadcrumb trail instead of feeling like you neglected or I don't know, you just misread the signs or something like that. I feel like if you just kind of keep going and view it differently or try to shift perspectives a little bit to really take that one little like baggie of gold, and then leave, I think is also very helpful and can help prevent just feelings of like, I don't know, just distrust and feeling like you've been
Yeah.
misled.
I find this interesting too. Like I really want to talk about the importance of, there's, because intention is super, super key in terms of walking about life, right? In terms of growing and evolving. Um, with cults, with MLMs, there are differences, right? Like even though you are working for a company and it is a pyramid scheme in an MLM, um, the manipulation tactics and where and who it's benefiting comes down to greed, aka cult leader, aka, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with a cult, a true cult versus like a community, a tribe, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest differences in those groups is that a cult entraps you, right? And a community supports you for your
Mm-hmm.
individualism. It makes you like they both can make you feel safe because you have uh people to work like who are like-minded, right? But the biggest thing is like it doesn't matter. You might have shared interests. You might have the same viewpoints. You might have someone who is a guide or a leader,
Yeah.
right, of a group. But if they don't allow you to walk your own path
Yeah.
and do what you want, that is a major red flag in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we spoke about this a little bit right now, but also when we
Mhm.
had chatted the first time you told me about this, about how, like, with a lot of cults, the techniques and the practices they use are effective. Like, people actually feel things and it feels really powerful and they feel like they're connected to God because they're actually doing things that do that. They work. But the issue is you have the one all-knowing person that you can never have access to that information. You are already beneath them and will always be beneath them because you're not the chosen one. You cannot leave this community. You cannot speak to friends and family because they're not going to understand. There's a lot of, it's just that alienation and this sense of like, oh, I am not chosen, you're chosen. With a community, you can have a guide of somebody that has a direct line to source or something, but it's about like empowering you to find that within yourself and like go out and explore and like be you, do what feels good, leave, come back. Who gives a fuck? you know, you have
Yeah, and
autonomy.
it's autonomy. And I think that also leads to a little bit going back to the whole scamming situation, a little bit of confusion because there wasn't in this situation like me being locked into not being able to do my own things, to pursue my passions. But what I like, so there's a gray zone, I think, in that way too. And I think when one person is in a cult, there is a gray zone too, and there's a lot of commonality there. But the gray zone for me was that there was encouragement and there was
Mm,
opportunity for me to see my own power, but we weren't done with our work, but we have to keep this still quiet, but you can't tell anybody else, and this is the only way to go about it. I am really helping you, this is the way, right? So that is like the main telltale signs that like in all sorts of groups, MLMs, scammers, cults, if that companies, like in general, large corporations, any
mm-hmm,
institutions, religious institutions, right? Like it doesn't matter if they are not empowering you to tap into your power, because humans are so innately powerful, right? If that's not happening, then there should be some sort of red flag there.
mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And it's so tricky. And yeah, with manipulation, it gets really skewed because then you feel like it's hard to trust yourself, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to even feel connected to yourself because your brain is now programmed so much to like just feel a certain way about something or associate. It's like people that have been through trauma a lot and go through the same pattern with the same types of people because your body just becomes accustomed to that type of cycle and understands that to be safe because it's familiar, but it's not actually safe. It's just familiar, and it's so tricky. But coming into yourself and really understanding who you are and what you need and seeing, what kind of best fits that is one of the best things to do. Now, going with that, sometimes people will misconstrue that to mean if something is uncomfortable, if somebody tells me something I don't like, if somebody, um, I don't know, people then start to almost like avoid discomfort. But I feel like you need to step through it and talk about it. And then once, like, I feel like that's when people's true colors are really revealed, if you
Mm-hmm.
like really confront something, if they're very aggressive about it, putting blame, promoting fear, like if it's just kind of a show, instead of really going to the logistics of what's happening, I feel like that's also a red flag where you can then step away. But I think it's important not to also just shy away from things just because they're uncomfortable. There's a difference between discomfort and not being safe,
Amen. There's so much, frankly, with cancel culture that I think lends itself to the importance of being able to, of course, find your people so you feel safe, but also understand that we really are all on this planet for at the same time, right?
Yeah.
For some greater mission to create more security and harmony, and it feels chaotic right now, and it also is really beautiful because I think that there's a lot of rebirth that is happening even in little pockets of places, and more people now because of the discomfort are speaking truth, and
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable, right? It is uncomfortable, but the more that I think we all know in life, and we learn, the less we know, right? And we become aware of that being the all-encompassing truth. So can you be a teacher and a curious student at the same time in conversations? That's, I believe, how you can alchemize a lot of
Mm-hmm.
stuck energy
Yeah.
and repeating patterns.
Yeah, definitely. How does your healing journey look like moving forward?
It's funny. I didn't even anticipate truly this being a piece of my healing journey. I think up until very recently, it was um, just so buried
Yeah.
that for this to surface, um, it's bringing me to, I think, a completely new path or I don't want to say new path. I think it was always a destined path. I think that I was in such a vulnerable place in that time that I started getting scammed, that if it wasn't this, it would have been something else that would have been cult like, or part of an MLM of some kind. So in many ways, I'm grateful that my life wasn't at risk, and that I'm where I'm at today, so I can talk about this. Um, I think the healing journey, like I mentioned a little bit in this conversation, is continuing to give myself the grace and the space to come back to myself. It's to be able to speak truth when the truth is appropriate. It's the ability to like have more discernment in conversations and connections, and then also into like not intellectualize pain anymore. It's to be able to feel the pain, because I think that's where the most beautiful healing happens. So I would say, if out of anything and everything, that's what it is at. And I do think a big piece of my journey is bringing more awareness to this, because I know if it's happened to me, someone who I think that is um, pretty smart and empathetic and has a good BS meter. I know it happens to a lot of other people, especially during times of chaos. And as we were talking about, the more chaos that ensues, the less people tend to trust themselves and the more reactive people become. But how do you respond to misconceptions? How do you respond to mistruths without trusting yourself?
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm at. How about you?
Oh, I think I wasn't expecting you to ask me
Plot twist.
that. um, I feel like right now I'm just I feel like I'm just really I've settled into myself, and now it's kind of like really getting to know how that how I want to like embody that here and just take that with me in all situations. I don't know, I just feel very different now, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like it's been very apparent to me how much I really need to let go of certain things that I've deeply associated myself with and kind of like reassess how I experience them. Just to allow myself to continue to be in environments and around people that are going to promote growth, instead of having like one foot here, one foot there.
Mhm.
So I'm allowing myself to kind of find that journey forward. And I feel like in that, I don't know, I'm really just following my inner compass at this point and I'm just on for the ride, honestly. I don't
Love
know.
it. Being able to like let go and honor it's almost like release the tight grip around a deeply ingrained identity that you've had. And
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, the big one is dance.
Mhm.
I've decided that I think this is going to be my last month doing samba. Um, because I feel like they there are some gigs that I really enjoy and some people that I really enjoy, but for the most part, I just don't like feeling like a spectacle. It just doesn't feel good, and I want to experience dance in a way that just resonates with me better and just be around people that I resonate with more,
Mhm.
But I feel like I've been so apprehensive about letting it go because dance is such a big part of who I am. And I think it's just allowing myself to redefine how I engage with dance,
Mhm.
which I think a part of me is, I think that's the last little bit that's been a little bit like sticky in
Mhm.
terms of, stepping into this new identity. But no, I'm ready. And I've made the decision that, yeah, this will be my last month and I'm going to find new ways of dancing.
Yes, you are. But that's exactly, it's like energy never leaves, right? Because there's always this there's always this total amount of energy, right? So it's like
Yeah.
when you're letting something go, as soon as you're letting something go, because energy is always there,
Mm-hmm.
it's automatically like making space for this new thing that's already been there.
Yeah. It's
It's
not
just,
even going, it's just like fitting better.
yeah.
So it's like, why would I be resistant to letting it go? Because it's just gonna feel better. you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I think with that too is a lot of like people pleasing. I don't want to let like the company down but it's like I'm not. They'll be fine. you know?
Yeah, and it's not
Um,
like you're leaving on bad terms, and I
yeah,
think that's like,
exactly.
yeah, it always goes down to like, I think a lot of times, there's been this like even trend of being frustrated with, I don't know, a company or a job, and like not really, it's not the right word. It's not quiet quitting. It's like, because quiet
Oh
quitting is
yeah.
like silently going out, but it's like it versus just like amicably quitting. It's like now
Yeah.
there's this trend of like being like they wronged me, blah 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 blah. But like there's something about that where it's like, again, what's the intention behind that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
are you airing your frustrations out there just for the sake of like feeling higher and mightier about you doing that, or are you trying to draw awareness to some like things that are going on, and how is this going to impact you potentially working with other people in the future, right? Like
Yeah.
if somebody sees this, and
Be
let's
like, is
say,
there a liability to hire?
yeah, exactly, it's like,
Yeah.
where does that come from? So yeah, it's like when you leave amicably, unless they really really messed you up and you're trying to draw awareness to like how that
Yeah.
did that, it's like what, like, think of like, in my opinion, it would be like, how is this going to impact your future? Like, don't you want to play chess in their game of checkers? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I feel like, yeah. No, I love everybody in the companies I'm with, and it's just time for me to move on. And it's been a beautiful, beautiful time. But I also feel like in rehearsals I've been like, oh man, I could be doing this and this and this. And I'm like, Amber, just really savor the moment. It's like I've already savored it for so long. I just feel like my body's like, I'm just done. So
Totally.
I definitely, yeah, that'll be interesting. A little sad, I think, but also excited. But it's normal, with as parts of us kind of go and transform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll be good. I think it's going to be really
Yeah.
healthy for you. You're going to find
Yeah.
more aligned dancing opportunities. You're going to
Hmm.
find more aligned, like what, because you're like a jack of all trades, right? Like I think that you're going to find just so many other like spaces that are going to just feel more appropriate for this chapter in your life.
Yeah, definitely. Mike and I are actually starting a clothing company. We're designing clothing. So I've been really honing in on my sewing skills. So that's been fun. That's going to be a fun, like, little creative venture on the side.
That's so cool. Fun. Yeah, you guys
Yeah.
are you're so crafty, and like I think it's going to be really good to give yourself the
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah. Onwards and upwards.
Yes, queen.
All right, my friend. Is there anything else before we close?
Um, I think this really covered everything that I wanted to draw awareness to. I do believe that this journey, at least for this chapter of my life, is just beginning. I am going to do my best to be as open about this process as possible without um, doing harm, I think,
Yeah.
in terms of like, you know, because there are things that can happen energetically behind the tangible world. So yeah, I mean, if anything, just like follow along. I know that we have interests in other projects that are very relevant to this to help people come back to themselves, and you know, because we there is power in community and healing and connection and using people as conduits for empowering yourself. So there's going to be more to I hope look out for in the
Hmm.
future. So yeah, just start with the integration practices, trusting yourself in the meantime.
I feel like, to close, I just want to kind of touch upon that real quick. I think a lot of times with energetic stuff, again, people get scared in speaking up because it's like, oh, well, what if they put like a hex on me, or what if they do this, or they send like psychic attack and like all of this stuff. And I think it's important to understand that, again, at the core of everything, we are love. And when you approach something with love, it literally neutralizes everything. Nothing has power over you if you approach it from a place of love and truth. Like, literally, that is an unstoppable force, because it just takes the energy back to what it is, which is source energy. you know a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, what makes hexes work is we are essentially allowing them to happen. We have free will, so we don't have to allow them to happen. But if there's a part of us that is vulnerable and open to that, it's like a little back door for them to get in. But yeah, as long as you approach everything from love, nothing can stop you. If anything, it just heals that energy and the person it's coming from.
I think that that's a really important thing. We as people are so incredibly powerful, and we're all at different stages of life, right? So they're like during these times of transition or change or incredible vulnerability, like to be able to come back and use support from people, not even use support, but like have support from people who are in a more grounded place, who do have that power to help on the energetic field or the physical field or the mental space, like that, like there is so much healing that can happen in connection, in
Yeah.
relationships. And so just like in anything, if like you know what you need, the question is like, do you trust yourself to get that help in
Yeah,
that moment?
definitely. Awesome. Well, more fun stuff to come soon.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thank
for sharing, friend.
thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this to come out and keep spreading the word.
Yeah. And I'll put bloopers at the end for a happy, happy ending.
Definitely a happy ending.
Okay,
All right.
bye, friend.
Bye.
Thank you so much, my friend, for diving into this topic, for being open about it and vulnerable, and inviting me to be on this journey with you to healing. I love you so dearly. To get in touch with Joanna, follow her healing journey, and see some cool little things to come, you can follow her on TikTok and Instagram at Joanna C. Rosenthal. That'll be linked in the show notes, as well as check out her podcast, Quit Lying. There is some good stuff to come, so definitely recommend keeping your eyes peeled. I hope this brought a little bit of clarity, comfort, and I don't know, hope it was beneficial. Hope you were able, my goodness, I hope you were able to take something away. I'm sending you all so much love. Stay in your power. Trust that gut. I will see you next time. Stick around for some bloopers. Okay, so we are here today to discuss your little scamming adventure.
To clarify Amber's intro, I am not a scammer. I was scammed.
So Joanna was very badly scammed and very badly manipulated. So we want to bring to light situations like this for other people that have gone through it, but also to just help give the tools and just knowledge for people to protect themselves from from it happening to them.
Yes, that's a good way to sum it up. Back in 2017.
This is really serious.
So back in 2017, I in a really vulnerable spot. Can we start this over?
Joanna had a really crazy experience getting scammed, and it's turned into now this exciting little project. Sorry, we just talked about not talking about it yet. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Stop. Like, I think every time I think I'm composed, I lose it.
Oh my goodness.
This ain't even funny, you guys. This is very serious.
Thank you so much for listening to Diary of a Psychic Medium with me, Amber Amrine. To learn more about me, my work, and such, you can visit channelwithamber.com or follow me on Instagram at channelwithamber. A special thank you to Unicorn Heads for my theme song, A Mystical Experience. See you next time.